Hello, it's me, Jay, your DM. I use he, him.
I'm Matt, he, him.
I'm Embers Tide, I use he, him.
I am Air, and to round out the group, I also use he, him.
And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom.
We're looking at a boy cast, people.
That's
We're
right.
looking at a boy cast.
Prepare yourselves.
In case of emergency, break glass.
The glass ceiling that, ironically, we installed. Yeah. Woo!
We're sorry, ladies. We'll make it better, we swear. Oh, wait, no, you'll make it better, and we'll...
Yeah,
we'll
you know what?
Nope.
Instead of handling the complicated topic of gender politics, let's talk about the easy topic of Dungeons and Dragons. Typically speaking, we begin these things not by delving headfirst into the awkward pool of cisgender politics. We talk about crawling around in dungeons with a dungeon crawl. And
I like that one. That was kind of like, it was the start of Cowboys from Hell.
That was too many You've gone too far. Dungeon crawl. We put a little spin on it. You know, we put a little pepper on that one. It's delivered fresh.
And poured a bunch of Jack Daniels on that pepper.
We don't know how to cook, is what we're trying to tell you.
Embers,
Right,
I believe
yes.
that you have set a high bar for yourself and continue to pursue the lofty heights of delivering a song almost every time you're on this show.
Yes, and bad cosplay wings of wax.
I want everybody to know that, you know, none of us makes him do this. Like, we're not forcing his hand here. None of us says, oh, hey, you're going to be on. You better come up with a song. You know, I just want everybody to know, nobody's getting paid here.
What?
I'm not getting paid for this?
The contract we signed for you is very clear, Matt.
But that being
Yes.
said, he has agreed to do a comedy parody song. And so we are going to allow that to happen because while we don't force people to do labor, we do exploit the shit out of it.
We will accept it. Okay, it'll be this will be a quick ditty from one of the finest bands of all time. Can I put in something like, do you like the Ravnica music? I like the Ravnica music. Don't you like Ravnica music? Baby. Da 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 da. Orzhov may want to scold me. Rakdos wrap chains around me, and I want Gruul to hold me, baby. Did you know too many flumps? I didn't know that many flumps, but we could know one flump or two. Maybe you were born to save, I was born to runes, but every time I look at that ugly moon, it reminds me of you. It reminds me of you. Oh.
Yay!
There we go.
I swore I forgot that the Violent Femmes had more than one hit song. I was like, it has to be Blister in the Sun.
You, my friend, have just taken years off my life.
I'm sorry. I take it back and like, oh, right, American music, of course. I'm going to totally
I have never
like,
heard that song before. I have never heard the name American Femmes before.
Violent Femmes.
Sorry, did I
Okay.
say
Oh
man?
my god. Oh my god.
I don't know any of these people. I'm afraid I may have accidentally joined a geriatric convention.
Shaking. Well, no, if anything, the Violent Femmes are the ones in the geriatric convention. But if you look back to the world of college music in the US, the era of REM and Sonic Youth, the Violent Femmes were
I
an
listen to many musics
incredibly
every day.
eclectic punk band
This is an
that
alternative rock.
covered
It's
like
college rock.
every genre and are just amazing. Just chef's kiss, brilliant, soulful dorks.
I listen to many albums every day.
Actually, music-related thing.
Yes?
Bittersweet Symphony, the guy who wrote it got the rights for it back from.
Yeah, they released the
Oh.
Rolling Stones released the royalty streams now, and they said they blamed it on their old manager.
Wait, Bittersweet Symphony is a Stone song?
The refrain, that like symphonic refrain, was basically, as I understand it, the Verve, the band, got approval to do a 6-note excerpt of a Stones song, but then they did a second 6-note excerpt or some shit like that, some pedantic crap like that, and they lost all their royalty streams because of it.
I had no idea.
Welcome to Mic Check, where we play on the stage of bad decisions to deliver the chords of wisdom. Coming at you live today, we've got DJ Embers. What is it? Bassist Airy Fresh. And of course, on drums, as always, is Matty Jacks. Welcome.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about the Stones, I say Keith Richards is a probably Lich Bard Ranger multiclass, and Mick Jagger's he's Rogue Bard all the way. But they're both certainly undead.
I mean, I hope nothing tragic happens between now and when we release this podcast. Sometimes at night I listen to
I have exhausted
what is
all
basically
topical
elevator
musical
music. Is that
knowledge
relevant? Should
that
we? If you want to start talking about In Love with a Ghost, I know them.
Lady from Ipanema?
No, what? I don't get your jokes.
It is literally like the elevator song.
Great.
Oh,
I didn't know they
man.
had names.
Matt's got receipts.
Jesus Christ, Matt. So anyway, Air, you had a dungeon crawl, right? This is not Mic Check. This is
I
actually
did.
Insight Check.
I wanted to quickly shout out Beyond 20, which is a Chrome extension, which adds functionality into your D&D Beyond character sheet in order to make it roll stuff in Roll20. So basically, the sidebar in the character sheet for D&D Beyond, it inserts buttons for either showing that thing in the Roll20 chat, or if it's a weapon or a damaging spell or a healing spell, a button to actually roll that thing. So I was playing my rogue character. I was testing it out, and it rolled my rapier. It added on the sneak attack. It was very impressive. So if you've ever been flustered by screwing around with the OGL or the actual Roll20 character sheets for 5e, this is your ability to use the, I would say, super slick D&D Beyond character sheets with Roll20 seamlessly.
Right, and this not only counts for character sheets, it also works for monster sheets as well. So for DMs, you can now go into D&D Beyond, prepare your encounter in the brand new encounter builder, and then once you're done building the encounter out, you can save it, and when it goes to the game time, you can now launch your encounter, click out the stats, roll from the stats page straight to Roll20 without ever importing anything over to Roll20. So the amount of prep that goes into preparing an encounter has dramatically increased. It's went down from like 3 websites in 2 hours to 1 website in 30 minutes. It's really, really nice.
Now, it's not perfect yet.
I mean, it's pretty darn good.
No, it's great, but like sometimes it does just crank out some garbage.
The only time it really did that was when you had the flame sword.
Yeah, it's like multiple damage types. Yeah.
Well, I guess crits
and then,
still
like,
look a little
some
funny.
crits, and it doesn't add in
Yeah.
every modifier.
Okay, the
I
only
think Air found that
the only
today.
modifier it doesn't add in is rage, which is difficult to add in because you can be in rage or out of rage, and there's nothing in the character sheet that reflects that. Anyway, shut up, Matt.
This is the dynamic we invited.
It's a great tool, despite what Matt Will Jackson
It is
says.
a great tool, but it's still. I'm just saying that it's still fairly new. It is constantly improving. Because I think we saw like the one error one day, and then it was literally patched.
Yeah,
the
fairly
next
new
day.
and constantly improving is a lot like my respect for you, Matt.
Children, I will turn this podcast around, so help me gods.
Somebody's got to turn this thing around.
Yeah, just stop. You can just stop recording and leave. We're fine. We got the rest of this. No, but we invited you because you're a nerd, and you think about numbers a lot like the rest of us, like those who are here. With the exception of maybe Embers, I don't know that Embers spends as much time crunching builds as the other three of us.
This is the second time in a week that you've accused me of liking math.
You do. I can't help it.
It's not.
I can't help that you like math.
I'll like math enough
reputation.
for the four of us. Don't you worry.
So we actually gathered here today to talk about multiclassing.
We
also,
did.
to finish Dungeon Crawl. Did anybody else have a Dungeon Crawl?
Did you guys talk about Descent in already?
No, we haven't.
Hey, that was a thing that happened.
It
So
sure
D&D
was.
Live, that did indeed happen. And they announced a new environment. Well, I guess just a new kind of campaign setting of Vernus.
This hobby's
Yeah.
going to hell.
Yeah, we're going to hell. We're getting a new Starbucks, and then somewhere late in the year, I think we're getting a Eberron?
Honestly, can I just say that I'm most excited about the starter kit, which is weird.
The Essentials kit.
Yeah, a 60-page Chris Perkins adventure is very enticing. And if you watch the D&D Beyond update, they also announced that if you buy the starter kit, you get it for free on D&D Beyond, and they're going to have supplemental adventures set after the end of that adventure that'll come out periodically on D&D Beyond.
They're kind of like tweaking and optimizing this efficiency, this income stream.
Right, because this is one of the unique D&D products that actually comes in plastic wrap, where they can put in like a code. So,
Yeah.
like with the books, they can't really put a code for the book in with the book because it would obviously get lost on the way out. There's no plastic wrap.
Right.
And I'm just excited for a 60-page Chris Perkins adventure that then comes with more Chris Perkins adventures down the road. That's awesome.
Right.
4d6 for the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get some dice, you get a DM screen, blah,
Two
blah, blah.
d20s.
But to be able to get periodically updated adventures, even if they're not related to each other, but to be able to get almost like your pet stuff every month, or you get a box of essentials every month from Amazon. This can be like your periodic adventure story box, kind of like services like the Mysterious Package Company, I think it's called. They definitely hew to the Eldritch side, but it's periodical releases that come straight to you. It's kind of cool.
And like Matt was saying, Wizards of the Coast has finally learned their lesson about which dice to include in the dice kit. So they're actually putting in 2 d20s, which is good. And they're including 4 d6s, so you can roll stats. And also for sneak attack damage and fireballs and that kind of thing, you need more than 1 d4. Or d6, I mean. And that's true for their main set of dice as well, for the actual Avernus set that they're releasing. They've got 2 d20s and 4 d6s. And they come with little printouts of all the monsters in the Avernus adventure. So it's actually worthwhile to get the Dungeons & Dragons official dice for once.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there was so much hate for the Chultan dice until this stream happened. And people started saying, oh God, I hope they're not puke green again. I was like, oh.
It was not a pretty color.
But either way, apparently their previous, even on the stream, they were kind of like apologetic about their previous dice. They were like, yeah, we usually, we may not hit it out of the park the first time, but we usually get it right after a little bit. I'm like, geez,
Wow.
Was the response to the previous dice that bad?
Man, you guys got skewered for old dice. Like, that's a lot. But people get set up by weird things. I remember I was at PAX East waiting in a merch line, and this guy talked to me for like 15 minutes about how like one logo from one PAX was better than another logo from another PAX, and how could anybody have ever thought that they could release the one that he thought was worse, because that's
I bet some people collect PAX badges. I bet that's a thing, huh?
Sure. Do people collect fingernails? People collect anything.
The classic XKCD quotes that Air likes to point out sometimes.
Human interest groups are nested fractally. There is no bottom.
Yes.
Yeah, so like human interest can get as specific as you can imagine.
But for Avernus, the way that they've previewed that adventure, I like the way that they present it as a very complex set of compromises, almost like a choose your own adventure where you're forced to make these difficult compromise decisions, weighing 2 bad options, but having to choose one. It exposes, I guess, it could expose players to some interesting choice mechanics, and that could be kind of cool. I'm not terribly interested in hell as a premise, but
Me either.
but
How do you feel about Baldur's Gate?
Baldur's Gate is kind of cool. I mean, there was a game there.
It is.
Weird intro before you Go to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about Baldur's Gate, that it's like just shitty, downtrodden Waterdeep. I'm wondering if like PCs are going to get to Avernus and be like, this is a little better.
It's like, yeah, but the scorched ground, it's clean.
Yeah.
Surprisingly good school district.
At least the people here are lawful evil, At
The
least you can
zoning
take
laws
their
are
word.
very strict. Every Lemure is on a leash. Like, it's very civilized.
Yeah, the whaling has specific times that it's allowed. Embers, you were talking about these boxes that come monthly, and that reminded me of James J. Hake. I promise that makes sense.
Does he come to your house every month?
In a box?
No. No?
With a fox?
James J. Hake releases weekly adventures, like not full adventures, but like encounters, specific singular encounters on D&D Beyond. James J. Hake releases encounters every week, and they're really good, and you should check them out. He generally themes them after major events that are currently going on in the D&D community. Like when Critical Role was fighting gnolls, he released a gnoll encounter. And when Saltmarsh was just coming out, he released several encounters with Sahuagin, or Sohagen, whatever you want to call him. So if you go there, it's generally an encounter is like a skill challenge or a roleplay situation, and then a combat scenario, or sometimes you can avoid the combat scenario through the skill challenge or the roleplay situation, and then some sort of resolution with appropriate reward, which you can obviously modify as the DM. And yeah, that's my dungeon crawl. And I think with that, dungeon crawling is over.
I got one quick one. Oh, we're so screwed. My quick one is just that Stephen Colbert and Matthew Mercer did a one-shot, and they're both beautiful people, and you've probably heard of both of them, but you should watch it, because Stephen Colbert, watching him get to use his imagination and like dream in his mind after decades of being like on every beat for The Daily Show, comedy, his night show, all that stuff, he has to be A game all the time, super precise. He just got to like sit back and let his imagination go, and you could see it on screen. It was so great.
He had such a pure, boyish glee.
Like, you could watch him going back.
Yeah, I
to
felt
when he
my
last played.
cynicism like melting away watching him play. It was magical.
And that's why you should watch it. That's exactly why you should watch it.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah. Oh, what the fuck? This week was so good.
It's a big week.
There was the live event. Oh my god.
Big week.
All right, Matt, what do you got? It can't possibly measure up.
I was going to do the Stephen Colbert.
Oh.
Well, fuck you.
Yeah, it's all right.
Hi, on this show, not only do we talk about things that are new and exciting in Dungeons & Dragons this week, we also talk about questions that people send us. And you too could send us questions at Insight Check Pod. So follow us so that way if we ever ask a question, you can be one of the people to say, actually, to us. It'll be fun. So this week we're talking about multiclassing. Air, this seems to be a topic that you are particularly fond of.
I am. I love me a good multiclass.
So what is multiclassing and why should we do it? And why shouldn't we do it?
It is when you take levels in 2 or more classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Why should you do it? It allows you to create characters of differing flavors than you could probably get from the stock class and subclass combos, or it lets you combine a lot of mechanical things from different classes to come up with some really interesting ways to leverage the various strengths of the classes. 5e, if you really get into multiclassing, you can see the brilliance and refinement of the design of 5e is really impressive. There's a lot of synergy between the core classes that they've created.
Yeah, things like proficiency and spellcaster levels and things like that are purely designed to make mechanics like multiclassing a lot easier and simpler.
But even individual things between classes, every time I dig into them, I keep thinking, wait a minute, that would allow for that to happen. That would allow, like the current PC I'm working on for our upcoming campaign that Jay is DMing, was I happened to read that the Frenzy Barbarian, it's the one instance where you get a bonus attack, an attack with your bonus action that doesn't require you to take the attack action first. And I was like, wait a minute, that would allow you to bonus action. If you mixed it with Rogue, you could bonus action attack, get your sneak attack, then hold your action to hold an attack for some obvious trigger on like the next round or whatever, and then say, oh, I'm waiting for him to go. Hey, look, he's going. stab again, and you could get 2 sneak attacks off in a round because there's no gating of that bonus action attack like there is in a lot of other features. So I mix those two together just to build out that concept. And there's so many of those synergies all over the place in 5e.
Yeah, so multiclassing is great. We have a lot of questions from people who listen to the show who have asked about multiclassing. So now we will answer those cues. Ooze the Muse asks, aside from the mins and the maxes, how much should story/plot come into your multiclass? Especially prudent if you multi after the campaign is going. Okay. So I mean, this is the classic question.
Yeah.
This is the classic question of
It's like, how do I actually implement a multi-class into a story narrative, which is typically defined
Should I
around
have
singular
to?
classes? Yeah, if I have to. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, people always want to know, you know, can I just take a level in Rogue and not worry about it? Or should I have, like, an NPC I meet that trains me in Rogue and things like that? And a lot of people can be kind of sticklers about this sort of thing. I'm not much of a purist myself. If a player wants to take a new class, or a new level in a new class, and they can justify it to themselves, then I think that that's probably fine for me.
Yeah, I think unless you have a very, very specific or very, very disparate pairing of classes in a multi-class, I don't think you need to feel the burden to build an entire narrative around it, unless you want to.
Yeah, and sometimes it just works out nicely that things happen to be going in a certain direction. Like when Vax'il Dawn made the deal with the Raven Queen, and then he had already been considering multiclassing into Paladin. But because of that deal with the Raven Queen, suddenly he had a god and a reason to multiclass that was narrative inspired. But the multiclass itself was not focused on the narrative. It was just something that Liam O'Brien wanted to do because he knew he could do more damage that way. So yeah, it's something that, you know, all players go through. They get to a certain level in a class and you look at those higher class features and nothing's really that exciting anymore. So you start looking around at some of your options, because in 5th edition especially, most of the good stuff is in the first 3 levels.
I wanted to say that I think that the min-max or the mechanical benefit versus the story benefit, one can lead to the other. Like I started after our conversation of in the Monk episode last week, where we were talking about Monk works really well with Druid, I started thinking about Barbarian and Druid, and eventually I landed on War Domain Cleric. Druid. And I started thinking about this character as like a Chaltian expat who always turns into dinosaurs, blah, 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 because he saw them growing up. But then I was like, oh, you know, that is actually really interesting. Maybe his parents were war priests. And something happened there that had to lead them away to go to Chalt or Hideout. And now he's breaking faith with the gods of his parents and becoming a druid and worshiping nature or a nature deity or something like that. Like, so that whole combination of classes was initially set up to be a mechanical thing to just really juice being in animal forms and getting more attacks. But now it's like all these different plot elements of the backstory started lining up as I thought about what those mechanical things meant in a narrative context.
And it can be kind of tricky with certain classes where you want a multi-class. If you're strictly adhering to the narrative of these classes, it can be kind of tricky because let's say you wanted to multi-class into monk. It would be sort of hard to justify becoming an ascetic monk very suddenly. So sometimes you just sort of have to take away some of the flavor. And that's one of the things we were talking about last week with the monk being so specifically flavored. It narrows your options with the class, which is one of maybe the weaknesses, in my opinion, of it not being just martial artist generally instead of being monk, is that like I have a druid in my game who is thinking about taking a level in monk. And it's not like they're going to disappear for a year in a monastery to learn from a Shaolin master. So all of the ascetic features are going to be really weird for them. All of the like key channeling is going to be just like a sudden like, oh yeah, I can do that now. Because it's like there's no narrative way to really introduce that into his character because it is flavored so specifically. But, so yeah, I wouldn't stress it too much. You know, sometimes these are superhumans and they just become superhumanly good at certain things.
Or there's ways to reflavor, I think. They're like, I've moved beyond just being connected to nature to the very life force that makes it flourish in the first place sort of thing. Like there are story elements you could grab at there.
Sure, yeah.
Or you can just be really lazy and just be like, yeah, I've been able to do this all along.
The Mary Sue solution. I've always been this awesome.
I think my druid solution is like the monk is all about punches, and my character's a cat, so I can scratch good. All right.
Oh, it's
Fine.
Will. Okay. Gotcha.
If you can work it into your story, that's great, because obviously the more you can flesh out your character's growth and changes and draw those into the narrative, draw the mechanics into the narrative, that's going to enrich your experience. But don't stress about it too much. You know, just have fun. If you want to take a couple levels in Rogue because it gets you a cool class feature, maybe you can figure out the why of it later. Don't freak out too much. And I think as a DM, you know, the worst thing you can do is assign homework to your players that they don't want to do. So just be like, or make them feel like they have to earn everything. Like, oh, you want a multi-class and a monk? Okay, submit me a 3-page backstory reason for why you're suddenly a monk. I was like, maybe that's not a great way to treat adults who are just enjoying a hobby with you. Anyway.
Something to consider.
Yeah. Drewberry 12. What is the least efficient multi-class you can think of? Now, I'm actually, before we get into all this, I'm interested in what the least mechanically focused among us thinks on this, because I'm curious if it's counterintuitive or if it's intuitive. So, Embers, your focus on the game is more from a roleplay narrative and in play perspective. So, if you think about two classes that just don't seem like they would click together, what comes to mind? Hang on one second. I can see that Air is currently suffering. Ha 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 ha, man, Mary Sue-lation. Oh, Mary Sue-lution. That's such a good joke, Air. I'll edit that back in.
I don't need your pity.
I'll edit that back in earlier. Don't worry, Air. I'll make you feel good. You'll sound hilarious in the edit.
It'd probably be a barbarian caster, because you'd probably struggle a lot with getting value out of raging and not being able to cast.
That is pretty apt. Yeah, it would be a struggle to balance a caster and a barbarian. So yeah, which caster do you think would be worse with barbarian?
Really, any of them. You can't cast or concentrate on spells when you rage.
I think that there would be some who are especially bad.
Okay.
I would say wizard.
Yeah, wizard would probably be the worst, because almost all of the wizard's class features are based around their casting.
Yeah.
Whereas a sorcerer has some physical manifestations of their sorcery, either bending luck, if they're a divine chosen one, or having the armor if they're a dragon person. Those kind of things can still come into play. Or like with a bard, you can still inspire people, right?
Yeah.
Inspire.
You're doing so great.
You're doing. Well, you can't even talk when you're raging. Like you can only.
Sure you can.
No, you can't. It's in the rage description. You can like make basic noises.
Yeah.
What?
It'd be like a heavy metal show.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't even, you're not even able to like communicate properly.
It says nothing about
Yeah.
Oh, does it not?
No.
No,
It's fine.
You can't cast spells and you can't concentrate on them. You're not just a gibberish.
It's fine. If I was wrong, I'll just edit it out.
No, this is... Why do you think I wanted to be here? I can argue with you in real time, not just like on my commute.
Great, cool.
Muscles don't talk.
Listen, I've been playing a long time, a lot longer than you. I know a lot.
Everybody knows that rage gives you lockjaw.
I've been playing a lot longer than you. I know a lot more than you. I'm just better at this game than you. It's all right. I may get some things wrong, but that's because I know so much. Anyway, it's fine. So worst class combos.
Good save.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really...
Hey, everybody! I feel like this is a very hostile environment right now. And I know that I'm the one creating the hostile environment, but I do want it to only work in my favor. So
Classic boy cast.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm very upset by what I did to myself.
So anyway, least efficient
So bad
multi-classes.
class combos.
Yeah.
Barb plus.
Yeah. Bard plus wizard is pretty shit.
Yeah.
It's rough.
That's pretty bad. It's gonna be hard to top. It's gonna be hard to top that one.
I mean, I want to go try it now, but...
It was really the first thing that came to mind for me, too.
Yeah, I mean, just because one class feature cancels out the other. If you're casting, you can't be raging, and if you're raging, you can't be casting.
It's also that wizards are like, aside from some very niche cases for subclasses for fighter and rogue, they are the only class that uses int. So they really do not work nice with almost anything.
Yeah, and
until that artificer comes out, that broken OP artificer class.
Only one of the subclasses is broken. Calm down.
I would not even say it's broken.
I would say it's broken.
I would think a wizard I would think the wizard multiclass will be.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say a 300-foot intangible familiar is pretty broken. That can cast any spell on itself is pretty bad. Yeah.
The thing is,
yeah, but it's the artificer spell list that keeps it from actually being.
Vitriolic sphere is on that list, and that's a pretty powerful spell to be able to do from 300 feet away.
Yeah, but they're also half caster, and that's a 5th level spell, so they're getting it at 17.
It's still really bad, all right? Anyway, so let's talk about Christian Vanitas.
At the Action Economist?
At the Action Economist has asked us, the best class to dip 1 or 2 levels in, caster, melee, and ranged, is there any class that is useful to multiclass into universally, as in regardless of your main class? And what is the most bizarre combo you can think of that actually still works? We actually got several questions like this. Yeah. So I do want to shout out those folks. Eridan Cesare, at Treos Serrari. Oh boy, I'm sorry. I can't read good. Also asked about thematic connections and weird choices with multiclassing. We also got Chad Welber, PhD, asked us about what are the best multiclass pairings. So yes, this was a frequently asked question. The best class to multiclass into and classes that work particularly well together. So the best class to multiclass into, Matt, Will Jackson, I feel like you haven't had enough time to talk yet. I want you to talk about this one.
So if you're talking about like which one to start with and then veer off into the thing you actually want to be doing, obviously fighter. But I would say if you're just dipping into a single level somewhere in the middle of what you're already doing, cleric.
I would say paladin.
Cleric is actually, when I was looking at it, it's just because they get their subclass at level 1 and there's so many options in those domains.
There really are.
Yeah, that's true.
Chief among them, heavy armor, whereas in multiclassing into the other ones, the actual heavy armor wearers don't actually, like you can't multiclass your way into plate.
Yeah, and you can get things like expertise through the knowledge domain and all sorts
bonus
of
action
different
attack
abilities.
Through War Priest. Spells.
All right, I'm coming around on cleric.
But yeah, if you're going to start at 1 and then switch off to the thing you really want to be doing, fighter.
I would say fighter's even good to dip into because 1 or 2 levels get you. First level gets you action. First level gets you a fighting style and a second wind, and then second level gets you action surge. Yeah, a 2-level dip into fighter at any point in your career could really boost. I mean, even a wizard could use action surge well.
It's true.
So it's pretty good, pretty universal. So cleric or fighter?
I'd say honorable mention maybe for rogue.
Oh, most certainly.
You get an expertise.
Rogue's pretty good.
Exactly.
Expertise.
If you take it off the hop, you're getting 4 skills. If you're taking it as a dip, you're at least getting 1 skill there, and then expertise on any 2 that you have proficiency in is there's. If you're looking to go a little skill monkey, a 1-level dip in rogue is for sure solid.
And an extra D6 on 1 attack per round isn't going to hurt.
Sneak attack.
This is true. Sneak attack.
So like even if you're any other melee class, 1 level into rogue, become a little bit more skilled, have expertise in 2 skills, and then get a little extra damage. I mean, it's a pretty good buy-in.
Yeah.
Not as useful for casters. No. I would say not as universally useful. But, I mean, even casters will often end up the skill monkeys of the party. And even a bard wouldn't hate 2 more expertises.
I even say a 2-level dip in rogue to get cunning action. I think almost any caster bonus action dash disengage or hide is kind of useful. Just to be like, I throw out the fireball and hide my ass behind the corner of that wall.
You threw out the fireball last round, and this round you find yourself surrounded. Okay, I would like to disengage.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, absolutely. Most bizarre multiclass that actually still works. I think monk and druid from from last week still reigns for me.
That's pretty weird. I thought this barbarian rogue thing that I've been working on was I was surprised it worked, but it's not too weird. Monk Druid is still pretty. That one caught me off guard.
Yeah, that one is surprisingly effectual. I'm trying to think of another bizarre one. I guess Warlock Sorcerer is not one you might expect because Warlocks have that limited spell slot situation, and a full caster probably doesn't want to go into a limited spell slot situation. But Sorcerers have access to, but having 2 slots that you get back on a short rest, and Warlocks get Invocations, which can be useful for anybody. And then, of course, there's the classic rules exploit where you can convert warlock levels into sorcery points.
Yeah, that actually ties to a question Raft of Al Santos asked us on Twitter about, is the myth of the Warlock Sorcerer build for real, where, you can start flipping your Pact Magic Warlock slots over to spell points as a sorcerer. Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
It's one might say broken. It is... It is something that your DM you should probably talk to your DM before you try to take advantage of it, because if you whip it out without your DM knowing, it's the kind of thing that they might shut down. Like, I don't like that.
Also, the Eldritch Blast, Quicken Spell Eldritch Blast is another big bonus of the Warlock Sork.
I think it's pronounced Eldritch Blast.
Eldritch Blast. Warlock's a great
Eldritch
1-level
Burst.
dip as well, actually. Because you get your...
You get your pack, but you don't
get your boo.
Yeah, that's it. You get your pact right at level 1. So you can pick up like Hexblade and start doing some charisma damage on your attacks and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jeremy Crawford has definitely said, if they're abusing it, don't. Which is really true of everything.
Yeah, and it also depends on how many short rests you get. Like, if your player is asking to short rest every 5 minutes so they can convert spell slots into, like, if you're allowing your players to short rest that often where that's really useful, that's kind of on you. Like, you're maybe giving too many short rests. Remember, enemies don't wait for your players to do things. They do things on their own. I mean, I feel like fighter and rogue is just an obvious easy one. That's not weird.
Yeah, agreed.
Warlock and paladin, because they both use charisma.
That's true.
Is
That's
pretty
interesting.
Straightforward. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting, like the paladin, which is like this upright, defender of some oath, and then the warlock who has made some sort of pact. Like, they're both based around an oath.
Yeah.
So,
it's both fealty to something.
Well, that kind of lends itself to the question at Malvidian asked us, which is, can you multi-class a warlock and a cleric? Which technically, of course, you can. I think the question more there is flavor-wise. Can you serve 2 masters? Could you do cleric warlock or paladin warlock or something like that?
easy. Just be a cleric of a fiend, and then you can have a fiend warlock and a cleric of a fiend.
Or be a celestial warlock with a, super goody
But
two-shoes
the thing about the celestial warlock is that they don't actually worship like a god, right? They worship like a Pegasus, like a celestial creature. Yeah.
Oh, winged horse lord.
Yeah, well, it's like a freelance. Like if it's a warlock who goes cleric, it's like a freelancer who gets hired on full time.
Oh yeah. I heard a great joke recently. Warlocks are paladins with bad PR.
Yeah.
Like, paladins are just warlocks with better PR.
You have an order, but I have a cult. I see how it is.
Yeah, exactly. But both of you are just being empowered by a supernatural being, right? And both of you are not full casters like regular. Yeah, it's fine. Let's go to Baron Basil. Baron Basil, at Baron_Basil, asks us, would you ever force a PC to take a level in something? I knew a DM who loved forcing a dip into Warlock on players whenever the story moved that way, i.e. they made an agreement with a supernatural being. I'll ask this to Embers. Embers, would you force a player?
Absolutely. It would be a consequence, but they could make the choice. And I would probably tell them, I would probably signal up front that there will be serious consequences to this choice. So, I mean, you could...
So like all things in life, consent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like the word force. Would you force a PC to do it? Probably not.
At the end of the day, if you present something to one of the players at your table and you're DMing and there's a strong, unexpected issue, conflict, or pushback, I think you have to ask yourself, like, what's your primary job as a DM, or like what's your primary reason to want to spend your time being a DM, and you'll probably find a different resolution for it. But I would very much say that, you know, there will be consequences for you, but it would be kind of a game-changing thing in the narrative. Like, I don't know, you are going to be forced to dip a level into monk, but you're going to achieve loyalty of this order of ascetic combatants who will be tied to your party as part of a much larger story arc. And that,
see, that's really cool. I really like that. That's awesome.
like, you can form partnerships, but you're going to make a compromise, and part of that compromise is you might have to sacrifice a level in your main class.
Yeah, I really like that.
I don't know if I would. Well, like I would definitely have like a character, you know, be beholden to the patron or whatever thematically, narratively. But I don't know if I would like mess with the mechanics.
Yeah, and that's a fair response as well. But I really like the idea of, like, in order to make a partnership with these monks, somebody's got to go train with them and, like, earn their respect. I think that that's pretty interesting. But yeah, typically speaking, I don't like to mess with the mechanics of my players' stuff. I feel like the players really only have control over two things in the game, and that is their character's creation and then their character's actions. Like, their character is sacrosanct. That's the one thing you as a DM can't control, and is the fun of D&D, is that they get to make choices that will radically affect your world. And you can't really tell them, like, no, you don't make that choice. You don't do that. Because then you might as well not be playing D&D. You just write a novel. Yeah. So I don't know that I would be like, you take a level in this. But if somebody was sitting there talking to a fiend, and they were making deals with that fiend, I might go to them after the fact and be like, hey, listen, you know, you're making a lot of deals with this fiend. You're kind of in the service of this fiend. Would you like to be, you know, would you like to take a level in Warlock with it as your patron? You know, maybe it grants you some sort of dark power. And then if they like that idea, yeah.
Yeah, I think the proper way to do it is always to present it as a choice. And I guess my interpretation of forcing just to use it the way that the question was asked, but the way you force it on someone is really just present them with a hard choice. Like it's like the way Taz would do the hard move in their amnesty stuff. Like you can always chart your own course and your own future, but this is a thing that I know you really want in your adventure, and I'm going to present a hard choice to get that thing that you want. You can find another way, of course, but it's an interesting choice to put on the table.
I think there's some mechanical, like maybe middle ground to kind of lead into it. So if they start doing something like taking the Warlock example, maybe you give them the Magic Initiate feat specifically for Warlock, and they can pick 2 cantrips and a Warlock spell once they've kind of entered in or done something for this patron. And then it's on level up when everyone's leveling up. Well, if you want to keep this, you're going to have to take at least 1 level in Warlock. So you kind of bait the hook and then make it the choice. But you don't have to commit them to that right off the hop.
Yes. The real DM move is to let them in.
Yes, exactly.
I think Jeremy Crawford has said this multiple times, that entering into a Warlock pact is actually somewhat dangerous for the patron as well as the person entering the pact.
Yes.
Because you're granting power to this person. And according to the mechanics of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, neither a cleric's god nor a warlock's patron can deny that power ever. Like, they can't take that power back. Like, once they've given it to you, it's more like they've taught you how to access it. They've shown you the code of the universe and allowed you to loop some rules around until you can now do this magic. And so, like, the patron grants this power to their worshiper, and then if the worshiper stops doing what the patron wants, now the patron has to deal with the worshiper because they just have that power.
Is anybody caught up on Critical Role?
I know. I'm currently working
Matt
on it.
Matt doesn't agree with me on this. Matt Mercer believes that a patron or a deity can yank away whatever they've given at any time, which is very much the way it used to work in previous editions.
I think it depends, you know, it seems like the cop-out, but it depends on the game, the characters, and everything else that's going on. But, I think if it's a moment where it feels good to just yank that away from them to so that, the player understands that, oh, I've offended something beyond me.
Oh man, I need these spoilers. That's juicy.
I don't really like that. As a DM, I don't like taking away my players' powers. Even like narratively, yeah, like the god or the creature or whatever may like be offended by your actions and maybe that should have consequences. Like that should definitely have consequences. But I don't know that I like the idea of like taking away your PC's powers and just leaving them like a glorified 70 hit point level 1 character. That seems kind of like a bummer to play. I don't know. It depends on your player. I mean, if your player's into it, then totally do what you got to do. But yeah, I think, especially if it was a protracted thing, if it went on for a long time, that would really annoy me as a player. Like, oh yeah, we're in a combat and everybody else is doing fireballs and cool spinning attacks, and I can do a hit with my sword, and I have 2 strength. I have +2 strength, so I can hit with like a +3 at level 12. It's crazy.
And clearly this is why Hexblade is bad, and Fighter Dip Warlock is just a better multiclass.
You have a real axe to grind with Hexblade, huh?
All day.
Man, that artificer, whatever sub it is that lets them attack with their intelligence.
Yeah, Matt doesn't like when you can use stats other than strength and dex to attack.
I don't dislike it. I just think it
You do.
invalidate. I mean, I do in this particular case.
I mean, I'm trying. Yeah,
But,
it
like-
is weird.
Like I don't have a huge problem with it, but it's just it makes like a strength warlock who is not Hexblade seem trivial.
It's true. It now feels like any other way of building a melee warlock is a trap, right? Like Hexblade's just so much better.
I mean,
But
I
you
will do
wouldn't
it.
you wouldn't make that complaint about a bard, where the swords bard is the best way to play with a fighter bard, right?
They already have dex as a stat.
Swords Bard does not get to attack with charisma.
But swords bard is the obviously best melee bard. So I mean, like sometimes subclasses are just the obviously best at a certain facet.
I think it's that warlocks can use strength weapons, whereas a bard really can't. So it's like, well, now it was basically designed around the I want to use a great sword, but now I need strength and dex for my armor and con and chaw for my casting. It was to avoid the 4 stat spread when everyone else is
right.
But that's the point of the Hexblade, is that you're like a bladey hex, right?
Yeah, but warlocks being as weirdly modular as they are, you can have an old one Hexblade.
It's true.
A sword-packed old one, yeah. Well, but you're making that choice. So I don't know. I feel like if there's just some subclasses that are better at certain things than other subclasses, and I think that that's just part of the game. In the same way that like war cleric is the best fighter cleric, like every class has an obviously better at this class, and you can take the other ones and do things with the other ones, but you're obviously making a trade-off there by not going with the one that's best at what you're doing. Like, you can be a melee nature cleric, but you're just not going to be as good as the war cleric is.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we have any other questions? Or I think we ran the gamut there.
I think that's it. All right, everyone. This was Insight Check, and we appreciate you all for being here.
I'd like to slow things down for a minute.
We'd like to thank Amy T. Falcone for our adorable chibi faces and social media branding. We would also like to thank Vinswept for our intro and outro music, Never Stand Alone, a rocking jam if ever there was one.
And if you'd like to ask us a question or just follow us, go at Insight Check Pod, and you can always leave us a rating on iTunes if you'd like. We would really appreciate it. And as always,
answering your cues from our collective A's, this
was
Inside.
Check. And basically, that my phone just went off. So I'm gonna say that And it went off of fucking key.
That's how phones work. They keep going off until you pick them up.
I silenced my phone because I'm a professional.
All right, I'm gonna silence this phone. No, it was stupid Twitch notifications. Apparently, somebody went live somewhere.
We did. It's our stream.
Oh, is it?
Small Folk went live on Twitch a minute ago.
Well, we've got our post-credits scene.
Professionalism.
Fuck you, Leaps.
You know, guys, it's an honor working with such professionals.
I told you you'd see how the sausage was made in the first 15 minutes.
We're just so on top of things.
Yeah, woo, fellow penis havers.